In the cold mathematics of the galaxy, there are universal truths that every civilized species learns. Fire burns. Gravity pulls. Light travels at a constant speed, and when you send a distress signal into the void, you accept that help may never come. The Galactic Council had maintained order for 17,000 cycles. They had protocols for everything. First contact, trade disputes, territorial negotiations. But they had one unspoken rule that every species understood. When a colony falls silent, when the distress beacon screams into the darkness, you calculate the cost versus the benefit. You measure resources against risk. You consider the political ramifications. And more often than not, you let silence be your answer. This was not cruelty. This was survival. This was wisdom earned through millennia of hard lessons. Then the humans arrived. They hadn't asked permission. They hadn't waited for council approval. They hadn't run the calculations that every rational species would run. They had simply heard the scream in the darkness, pointed their impossible ships toward the source, and jumped into hell itself without hesitation. The galaxy had a word for species like that. Several words, actually. Foolish, reckless, suicidal. But after the dust settled on Kepler, 442b, after the smoke cleared and the impossible became reality, the galaxy would need new words entirely. This is not a story about the distress signal. Countless signals fade into the cosmic background radiation every cycle, unheard and unanswered. This is not a story about arrival, though arrivals can change the course of history. This is the story of what happens when a species that refuses to do the math meets a galaxy that has calculated everything down to the decimal point. This is the story of the day the equations stopped working. This is the story of humans, and why the galaxy would never be the same. The distress signal had been screaming for 6 cycles when Council observer Threndak first brought it to the attention of the High Chamber. 6 cycles of automated emergency broadcasts, pulsing outward from Kepler, 442b in every frequency the Valorian colonists could manage before their communications array failed. Threndak stood before the Council's curved assembly hall, his forearms clasped in traditional supplication, his scaled hide shifting through respectful blue tones. Around him, representatives from 43 species watched from their elevated platforms, their varied physiologies requiring everything from liquid suspension tanks to zero-gravity fields to simple chairs not unlike those the absent humans might have used. The signal identifies the threat as Zetari raiders, Threndak explained, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into something the Council's systems could render universally. Colony population was approximately 8,000 souls, mixed species, primarily Valorian, but significant populations of Kelf, Drexian, and Mephanic peoples. The colony had been established for only 3 orbitable cycles. Council Speaker Voresh, a being of crystalline structure and considerable age, chimed with the sound of wind through glass. Cost assessment? Dirty Captain Dusty had expected this question first. He activated the holographic display, and numbers floated in the air before the assembly. Minimum deployment would require 4 battle groups. Transit time from the nearest military installation, 9 cycles. Probability of colonist survival upon arrival, less than 2%. Resource expenditure, significant. Political ramifications, minimal. The colony was independent, not under any species' direct protection. And the Zetari presence? The signal terminated mid-transmission. Standard raider tactics suggest they would have moved on within 2 cycles, but we cannot confirm. Vrendak's hide flickered orange with discomfort. He had lost a clutch brother to Zetari raiders 4 cycles past. He knew what the silence meant. The council chamber filled with the multilingual murmur of dozens of species conferring, calculating, considering. This was the mathematics that governed galactic civilization. Resources were finite, risks were real. Every choice had to be weighed against every other possible use of those resources. Voresh's chime cut through the murmurs. The recommendation: monitor the situation. Deploy survey drones when the transit time makes fiscal sense. Record the event for future strategic planning. Threndak's hide had settled into a grey of resigned necessity. By the time our forces could arrive, the outcome will be already determined. We cannot change what has already occurred. We can only document it. It was the practical answer, the logical answer, the answer that every species in the Council had given countless times before and would give countless times again. In a galaxy of billions of inhabited worlds, you could not save them all. You could only save those where the mathematics aligned. The human delegation requests recognition. The words cut through the chamber like an unexpected laser through hull plating. Every being present turned toward the human observation platform, a courtesy position granted to the newest species seeking council membership. The humans had no voting rights yet, no official standing. They were observers, meant to watch and learn how civilized species conducted themselves. Ambassador Chen Wei stood with the calm stillness that humans could adopt when they chose, her small form somehow commanding attention despite being among the smallest beings present. She wore what the humans called a dress uniform, covered in symbols and decorations that supposedly meant something in their military culture. The human delegation acknowledges they have no official standing to address this council, Chen said, her voice steady. But we request permission to respond to the Kepler 442b distress signal independently. The chamber erupted. Beings that communicated through bioluminescence flashed in confusion. Species that used pheromones filled the air with complex chemical signatures of disbelief. Those who used sound made their opinions known through everything from clicks to roars to ultrasonic vibrations. Varesh's chime eventually restored order. The colony is 9 cycles distant. The Zeathari raiders have likely completed their operations and departed. There is nothing to be done. With respect, Council Speaker, there might be survivors. Chen's face remained neutral, but something in her stance had shifted. Threndak, who had made a study of human behavior during their observation period, recognized it as the posture they adopted before doing something their own species considered dangerous. The probability is not 0, Chen interrupted, and even the translator couldn't quite filter the edge from her voice. If there's a chance, we go. That's not a calculation, that's a certainty. Councillor Draix, representing the Kelf merchant guilds, spoke with the careful precision of a species that had built an empire on trade. Ambassador Chen, your species has been in space for barely 300 cycles. You have no military presence in this sector. Your fastest ships are slower than our standard transports. Even if you departed immediately, the math says we try, Chen cut in. You're right about our ships, our military presence, all of it. But we're going anyway. This is foolishness, Councillor Marith hissed, his reptilian jaw clicking with agitation. You would waste resources, risk your ships and crew for a colony already lost? This is not how civilized species behave. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that made Threndak's translator briefly struggle to find appropriate conceptual matches. You're right, it probably is foolish. The colony is probably gone. We'll probably arrive too late. The Zetari might even still be there, and our ships aren't exactly warships. She paused. But here's the thing about humans. We heard them screaming. And when someone screams, we come. We don't do the math first. Varesh chimed with what the translator rendered as profound confusion. This is irrational. Yeah, Chen agreed. Probably is. We're going anyway. The council cannot support this action, Varesh stated formally. You will receive no military assistance, no logistical support, no political backing. If you encounter the Zetari, you will face them alone. If your ships are lost, we will note them in our records but mount no rescue. This is your choice, but you make it without the council's sanction. Understood, Chen said. She didn't seem surprised, didn't seem disappointed. We'll be departing within the hour. We request permission to access the full distress signal data. Threndak found himself speaking before he had consciously decided to. Granted. I will transmit all information we have. His hide had shifted to purple confusion even as he said it. Chen nodded once, sharp and precise. Thank you, Observer Threndak. For what it's worth, I hope we prove you all right. I hope we jump all the way out there and find nothing but debris and memories. Because if we find anything else, she paused, and Threndak saw something flicker across her face that his translator couldn't render into any known emotional spectrum. If we find survivors, if we find Zethari, if we find any chance at all to make a difference, then we'll have to make the galaxy's worst mathematical calculation work somehow. She left the chamber with the same measured calm she'd entered with, but every observer in that room could feel the shift in momentum, like gravity's pull before a jump to faster than light. In the silence that followed, Councillor Dryax spoke with the tone of someone explaining simple concepts to younglings. They will die. The Zihatari do not leave survivors. The colony is 9 cycles away at their speed, perhaps 12 or 14 given their slower technology. The humans will arrive at a graveyard and waste their resources learning a lesson the rest of us learned millennia ago. Perhaps, Voresh chimed. But I find myself curious what they will do when they arrive at this graveyard. Threndak was already pulling up everything his intelligence division had compiled on humans. 300 cycles in space, yes. But before that, thousands of cycles of recorded conflict on their homeworld. Species that had fought each other with rocks and sticks, then metal and fire, then terrible weapons that could crack their own planet. Species that had somehow survived all of it and decided to reach for the stars anyway. There was a phrase in the human lexicon that had caught his attention during his cultural briefings. They had many sayings about fighting, about war, about conflict, but this one had stuck with him. Fortune favors the bold. It was, he reflected, either the motto of a brave species or a stupid one. The galaxy would soon discover which. 12 hours after leaving the council chambers, the human fleet jumped. 3 ships. Not warships. Not battle cruisers, converted colony vessels, cargo haulers, and 1 ship that the humans called a hospital ship, apparently designed specifically to treat injuries. The fleet was led by a military vessel that barely qualified as a destroyer by galactic standards. Threndak watched the sensor data as they vanished into the deeper reaches of space. 9 cycles for a proper military vessel. The humans would take longer, but they had gone. The galaxy continued its business. Trade routes maintained their schedules. Political negotiations proceeded according to established protocols. Colonies thrived or failed based on careful calculation and proper resource allocation. Everything functioned as it had for 17,000 cycles. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 3 human ships burned toward a colony that had stopped screening 6 cycles ago, carrying crew that had somehow forgotten to do the math. Threndak created a private file in his observation records. He titled it simply, Human Response, Kepler 442b. Incident. He would monitor their progress, document their arrival, record their inevitable discovery of what the Zethari left behind. It was, he thought, going to be a tragic data point. Another lesson in why civilized species calculated before they acted. He had no idea he was about to witness the day the galaxy's equations stopped working. Captain Sarah Okonkwo had been awake for 36 hours straight when the UES Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 4.2 system. She stood on the bridge of what the Galactic Council politely called a patrol vessel and what a crew more honestly called the scrappiest tin can in the fleet, watching the sensor displays paint a picture no one wanted to see. "Talk to me, Martinez," she said, her voice carrying the rough edge of too much coffee and too little sleep. Lieutenant Commander Carlos Martinez hunched over his sensor station, his fingers dancing across controls that were a hodgepodge of human technology and poorly understood alien equipment they'd managed to acquire through trade, getting debris signatures throughout the system. "Colony location, Jesus, Captain. It's bad." Sarah had expected bad. Bad was why they'd come. Survivors? Scanning now. Colony main settlement is. Martinez paused, his jaw tightening. Gone. I mean completely gone. We're looking at crater patterns consistent with orbital bombardment, but I'm picking up some structures still intact in the outer settlement zones. Could be survivors took shelter. Extari signatures? That's the weird part. Martinez looked up, confusion clear on his face. I'm reading 17 Zethari raider vessels, but they're not moving. They're just sitting there, in orbit around the colony world. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Zethari raiders didn't sit still. They hit fast, took what they wanted, and disappeared before any military response could arrive. Sitting in orbit for... She checked the timestamp on the distress signal. 9 cycles. That wasn't raider behavior. "They're waiting," said Commander James Chen, her XO and cousin to Ambassador Chen Wei. He stood beside her command chair, his hand resting on the back as if anchoring himself. "They're waiting to see if anyone comes." "A trap," Sarah said flatly. "A trap," James agreed. Behind them, the bridge crew continued their work with the practiced efficiency of people who knew exactly how outmatched they were. The Defiant carried a crew of 47. She was armed with railguns that were impressive by Earth standards and laughable by galactic ones. Her armor could withstand some punishment, but 17 Zethari raiders could tear her apart in minutes. The smart play was obvious. Jump back out. Report to Earth. Let the Council know that the raiders were still present. Wait for proper military assets. Sarah tapped the comm panel. All hands, this is the captain. I'm not going to lie to you. We've got 17 Zethari raiders in system. The colony is destroyed. The smart money says we jump out and call for backup. She paused, looking around her bridge. These people had volunteered. Every single one of them could have stayed home, taken safe positions in Earth's growing space infrastructure. Instead, they'd climbed aboard 3 barely adequate ships and jumped into the unknown. But if there are survivors down there, they've been hiding from those raiders for 9 cycles. 9 cycles of terror, waiting for help that the Council decided wasn't mathematically sound. So here's what we're going to do. Franklin and Hope are hanging back at the jump point. They've got orders to jump out at the first sign of trouble. Us? We're going to take a very close look at that colony. We're going to scan every structure, every cave, every hole in the ground. And if there's anyone alive down there, we're getting them out. She could see James doing the mental math, calculating odds and angles. She could see Martinez pulling up weapons readouts, trying to figure out how 47 humans in one ship could possibly matter against 17 raider vessels. She could see young Ensign Park at communications, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped her console. I won't order anyone to stay, Sarah continued. Anyone who wants to take a shuttle back to Franklin and jump out. No judgment, no consequences. We volunteered for a rescue mission, not a suicide run. Show of hands. Who wants to head back? Not a single hand moved. Martinez broke it first. Captain, we came to help. Still got that job to do. Besides, James added with a grim smile, Zethari shields have a cycling weakness every 7 seconds. If we're stupid enough to get close, we might be stupid enough to exploit it. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Stupid enough. That might just be our species' motto. She settled into her command chair. Martinez, give me a stealth approach vector. Chen, start working firing solutions for every raider in orbit. Park, send a data burst to Franklin and Hope. Everything we're seeing, everything we're about to do. If we don't make it, at least Earth will know what happened. Aye, Captain, came the chorus of responses. The Defiant began her approach, gliding through the outer system with her minimal emissions profile. Human stealth technology wasn't great by galactic standards, but it was good enough to buy them time. Maybe hours. Maybe minutes. As they closed on the colony world, the scope of destruction became clear. The Valorian colony had been built into a series of interconnected domes, standard design for hostile atmospheres. The raiders had cracked the main domes like eggs, exposing them to the thin, toxic atmosphere. Fires had burned until there was nothing left to burn. The crater patterns suggested methodical destruction, not just attack, but deliberate erasure. Life signs, Martinez said suddenly, his voice tight. I'm reading life signs. Section 7 Delta. Underground. It's faint, but it's there. Multiple signatures. Maybe 200 individuals. Sarah leaned forward. 200. Out of 8,000. She kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. Can you determine species? Definitely getting Valorian thermal signatures. Some others. Captain, there's something else. The life signs are fading. Whatever shelter they're in, it's failing. How long? Environmental readings suggest maybe 36 hours before atmosphere contamination reaches lethal levels. Could be less. Sarah looked at the tactical display. 200 survivors dying slowly in a failing shelter. 17 Zethari raiders in orbit, waiting like patient predators. 1 human ship with a crew of 47 and weapons that might tickle the raiders' shields. Chen, what's the raider deployment pattern? James pulled up the tactical map. Loose formation. They're not expecting trouble. Why would they? They've been here for 9 cycles without any council response. They probably figured out the math too. Blind spots? If we come in from the northern pole, steep angle, we might avoid detection until we're almost on top of the colony. And then they notice us, converge, and we have maybe 5 minutes before they turn us into scrap. Sarah studied the map, her mind racing through possibilities. 5 minutes to get to the survivors. 5 minutes to load 200 beings onto a ship designed to carry 47. 5 minutes before 17 raiders demonstrated exactly why the Council had decided this wasn't worth the effort. Can Franklin and Hope make it to the colony if we draw the raiders off? James blinked. Yes, but Captain, if we light up every active sensor, broadcast on all frequencies, and generally make ourselves the most annoying target in the system, how long before those raiders focus on us? Maybe less. James's eyes widened as he understood. You want to use us as bait? I want to use us as a distraction. Franklin and Hope can land load survivors and jump out while the raiders are chasing us. We're faster than the transport ships. We might be able to outrun the raiders long enough for the others to escape. Might, Martinez said. That's doing a lot of heavy lifting, Captain. You have a better plan? Silence. Park. Send the plan to Franklin and Hope. Encrypted burst. Tell them we're running distraction in 40 minutes. They'll have one shot to get in and out. As Park worked, Sarah pulled up the personnel files for the Defiance crew. 47 people. 47 lives that she was about to gamble on the universe's worst odds. Engineers and scientists. Soldiers and medics. People who had families back home. Futures ahead of them. People who had heard screaming in the darkness and decided math didn't matter. Captain, Park said quietly. Franklin and Hope are acknowledging. Captain Rodriguez says. She paused, reading the message. She says Earth doesn't leave people behind. They'll be ready. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice for a moment. Then she stood, squaring her shoulders. All right, people. Let's show these raiders why you don't ignore human distress signals. Martinez, when we make our run, I want every sensor we have screaming. Light us up like a Christmas tree. Jen, prepare all weapons. We're not going to win a fight, but we're going to make them think twice about ignoring us. They're going to tear us apart, James said quietly. Probably, Sarah agreed. But not before Franklin and Hope get those survivors out. And that's what we came here to do. The Defiant moved into position, a small ship against impossible odds. On the bridge, the crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had chosen to be there, who had decided that some things were worth doing, even when the math said otherwise. 47 humans preparing to pick a fight with 17 raider vessels. The Galaxy would have called it suicide. The Defiance crew called it Tuesday. Approaching mark in 30 seconds, Martinez said. Sarah gripped her command chair. All hands, this is going to get rough. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. She paused. It's been an honor serving with you. Grim smiles. Determined faces. Determined faces. Mark in 10. Sarah watched the countdown. 5. The raiders continued their patient orbit, unaware. 3. Sarah thought of the 200 survivors hiding in darkness, slowly dying. 1. Lighted up. The Defiant sensor arrays exploded with activity. Every broadcast frequency suddenly carried the same message in a dozen languages. This is the UES Defiant, responding to the Kepler 442b distress signal. All raiders in orbit are hereby ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded. On the tactical display, 17 raider vessels suddenly vectored toward the Defiant's position. Sarah allowed herself a cold smile. Now let's see if we can outrun them. Helm, evasive pattern Delta. Martinez, fire at will. Let's give Franklin and Hope their chance. The Defiant dove into the planet's gravity well. Railguns blazing, broadcasting on every frequency, trailing 17 very angry Zethari raiders like a comet tail of certain death. Behind them, hidden by the distraction, 2 transport ships burned for the colony surface. The rescue had begun. Frendak was reviewing supply requisitions when the priority alert chimed through his observation post. He nearly dropped his data tablet, his hide flashing through several shades of surprise before settling on confused orange. The humans had arrived at Kepler 442b, but that was impossible. 9 cycles at standard military speeds, and the humans were slower. They should still have been in transit for another 3 cycles at least, unless... He pulled up the data stream, bypassing normal channels through methods that were technically against Council regulations but which every observer used when they wanted real information. What he saw made no sense. The humans hadn't waited for diplomatic clearance, hadn't assembled a proper fleet, hadn't followed any standard military doctrine. They'd just gone. 3 ships. Immediately. The moment they left the Council chambers, they'd apparently launched. And now those 3 ships were in the Kepler 442b system, with 17 Zethari raiders. This is insanity. Threndak muttered, watching the tactical feed. The human vessel, Defiant, according to the transponder, was diving into the planet's atmosphere with all 17 raiders in pursuit. The ship was broadcasting on every frequency, firing its primitive weapons, performing evasive maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel that size. It was also taking hits, lots of hits. Threndak watched in horrified fascination as the Defiant's shields flickered and failed. Hull breaches appeared. The ship was being torn apart in real time, and yet it kept moving, kept firing, kept broadcasting that absurd challenge about raiders standing down. "What are they doing?" he whispered. Then he saw the other two ships, human transports, burning for the colony surface while the raiders were focused on the Defiant. Understanding crashed over him like a wave. They were sacrificing themselves. 47 humans were dying to give 200 colonists a chance. The math didn't work. It couldn't work. You didn't trade 47 lives for 200 when the odds of success were nearly zero. You didn't sacrifice a ship, crew, and resources for... But they were doing it anyway. On the colony surface, Captain Rodriguez brought the UES Franklin down in a landing that would have made any flight instructor weep. The transport ship groaned and shrieked as it settled onto what remained of the colony's landing pad. Behind her, the UES Hope executed a similar maneuver, both ships' crews moving with desperate efficiency. "Medical teams, go!" Rodriguez shouted into her comm. "We've got maybe 3 minutes before those raiders notice us." The cargo bays opened, and humans in environment suits poured out. They carried emergency air supplies, medical equipment, cutting tools, everything they could grab in the 12 hours between leaving the council and jumping into darkness. Sarah Mitchell led the medical team, her helmet display painting the route to the underground shelter. The air was toxic, visibility was terrible, and somewhere above them, the Defiant was dying to buy them these precious minutes. They found the shelter entrance collapsed. Of course it was collapsed. "We've got cutting equipment," Mitchell's team leader, Lieutenant Park, said immediately. 40 seconds to breach!" "Make it 30, Mitchell said. "We don't have 40. The cutting torches blazed. Humans worked with the frantic energy of people racing against time itself. Behind them, more crew members hauled emergency shelter tubes, inflatable tunnels that would protect the survivors during transport to the ships. The shelter entrance gave way. Mitchell was first through, her helmet lights cutting through the darkness. What she saw would haunt her forever. 217 beings huddled in a space meant for 50. Valorians, Calf, Draxians, Methanics, and others she couldn't immediately identify. They were starving. Injured. Many were dying. The youngest couldn't have been more than 5 cycles old by Valorian reckoning. They looked at her with eyes that had given up hope 9 cycles ago. "We're from Earth," Mitchell said, her voice steady despite everything. "We're here to help. Can you walk?" A Valorian female, her carapace cracked and poorly mended, stared at Mitchell with compound eyes that flickered with disbelief. "Earth? The new species. But you have no military, no fleet." The council said. "The council does math," Mitchell interrupted. "We don't. Can you walk or do we carry you?" Above them, the Defiant was losing her fight. Captain Okonkwo felt the ship shudder as another railgun blast tore through the port side. Alarms screamed. Half her bridge crew was working with backup consoles because their primary stations were gone. "Hull! Breach on decks 3 and 4!" Martinez shouted over the chaos. "We've lost main engines, running on auxiliaries." "How long until Franklin and Hope can jump?" "They're loading survivors now." "Maybe 2 minutes." 2 minutes? Sarah looked at her tactical display. The Defiant was held together by prayers and spite at this point. The raiders were closing in for the kill, having apparently realized that the annoying human ship couldn't actually hurt them. "Chen, I need one more trick." Her XO, bleeding from a cut above his eye, managed a grim smile. "Fresh out of tricks, Captain. We've used them all. Then we improvise." "Martinez, how close are we to that lead raider?" Martinez checked his dying senses. 800 meters. Why? Sarah's hands flew across her console, overriding safety protocols that existed for very good reasons. "Because if we can't outrun them and we can't outfight them, maybe we can out-crazy them." "Captain, what are you—" "Brace for impact. We're ramming the bastards." The bridge went silent for 1 shocked second. Then Martinez laughed, actually laughed. "Well, that's certainly one way to make an impression. Earth Fleet is going to have words about this in the after-action report." They can write all the reports they want, Sarah said, assuming anyone survives to write them. Helm, point us at that lead raider and give me everything the auxiliaries have got. The Defiant, burning and broken, turned toward the nearest Zethari raider and accelerated. On the raider's bridge, Commander Zakthir watched the wounded human ship turn toward him with confusion that rapidly turned to horror. Surely they couldn't possibly. The Defiant struck the raider's starboard side at full auxiliary power. Physics didn't care about shields or armor or superior technology. Physics cared about mass and velocity and the fact that both ships were now occupying the same space in a very messy way. The raider's shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons and deflect missiles, did absolutely nothing against several thousand tons of human-built ship traveling at combat speed. The Defiant's reinforced bow, built to punch through ice on Europa, tore through the raider's hull like paper. Both ships became a tumbling, exploding mass of metal and fury. On the colony surface, Rodriguez watched the expanding debris field light up her senses. They actually did it. They actually rammed them. Captain, we have all the survivors, the cargo master reported. 217 souls. We need to go. Now. Hope, are you loaded? Affirmative, Franklin. We're ready to jump. Rodriguez looked at the debris field one more time. 47 humans had just died buying time for 217 colonists. The math still didn't work, but the rescue had. Jump, she said quietly. Both ships. Jump now. The two transport ships tore away from the planet's gravity well and vanished into faster-than-light travel, carrying survivors who should have been dead, rescued by a species that should have known better. Behind them, 16 remaining Zetari raiders regrouped around the expanding debris field, confused and angry. One of their vessels had been destroyed by a species that wasn't supposed to be a threat. The humans had broken every rule of engagement, ignored every tactical principle, and somehow succeeded through sheer audacity. The raiders jumped out within the hour, reporting back to their collectives that the Kepler 442 system was far more trouble than it was worth. Threndak watched the data streams in stunned silence. The humans had lost a ship, lost 47 crew members, succeeded against impossible odds, rescued 217 survivors that the Council had written off, and somehow, impossibly, the math still didn't work in any way that made sense. He opened a communication channel to the Council speaker. Vorish needed to see this immediately. 3 cycles later, the UES Franklin and Hope arrived at Council Station. Their arrival was noted with considerable more attention than their departure had received. Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the Council once again. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 17 survivors, representing each species that had been rescued from Kepler. 442b. They stood in their recovery suits, still bearing the marks of their ordeal, alive when every calculation said they should be dead. The Council recognizes Ambassador Chen. Varesh chimed. Council Speaker, honored representatives. Chen began. We have returned from Kepler 442b. We lost 1 ship and 47 crew members. We rescued 217 colonists that were written off as statistically insignificant. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I understand the Council's position. I understand the mathematics. Resources are finite. Risks are real. You have to make hard choices based on careful calculation. That's wisdom earned through millennia of governance. Chen turned slightly, gesturing to the survivors behind her. These beings represent 6 different species. They include younglings, elders, scientists, teachers, artists. Each of them is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. And each of them was deemed not worth the resources it would take to save them. Ambassador, Voresh began. I'm not here to condemn the Council, Chen continued. I'm here to inform you that humanity has a different approach. When we hear someone screaming in the darkness, we go. We don't calculate first. We don't measure the cost against the benefit. We just go, because that's what we do. She pulled out a data chip and placed it on the holographic display pedestal. This contains our full after-action report from Kepler 442b. Tactical analysis, resource expenditure, everything. We're sharing it freely with any Council species that wants it. Maybe you'll find something useful. Maybe you'll just confirm that we're too reckless to deserve Council membership. Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from 43 species. But here's what I need you to understand. That distress signal? It won't be the last one, we answer. We're going to keep going. Keep responding. Keep doing the math wrong. Because 47 humans decided that 217 lives were worth their own, and that's not a calculation. That's a certainty. Your species lost a ship, Councillor Drayek said carefully. 47 dead for 200 survivors. The ratio is irrelevant, Chen said flatly. Every single one of those 47 crew members volunteered. They knew the odds. They went anyway. That's humanity. We don't do the math because we already know the answer. If someone's in trouble and we can help, we go. That's the equation. In the observation gallery, Threndak watched the council members process this. He could see the confusion, the disbelief, the carefully hidden respect that some species were beginning to show. The humans had changed something. They'd responded to a distress signal that the galaxy had ignored. They'd succeeded where success was calculated to be impossible. They demonstrated that sometimes refusing to do the math could produce results that no equation predicted. Voresh chimed thoughtfully. The Council will consider this information. Your species has demonstrated remarkable tenacity and disturbing disregard for standard risk assessment. We will need to discuss how this affects your application for membership. Take your time, Chen said. We'll be here. And when the next distress signal comes, we'll be answering that too. She left the chamber with the survivors, their quiet presence speaking louder than any speech. In the weeks that followed, something interesting happened. 3 council species quietly updated their distress response protocols. Emergency response times were shortened. Resource allocation formulas were revised. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would admit the humans had been right. But ships started moving a little faster when distress signals came in. Threndak documented all of it in his observation files. The human response, the rescue, the shift in council behavior. He titled his final report carefully, Humanity, a Study in Mathematical Impossibility. His conclusion was simple. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, heard someone screaming in the darkness, and refused to do the math. In doing so, they had changed the equation entirely. The galaxy would never be the same. Not because humans were the strongest, not because they had the best technology, not because they made the smartest decisions, but because when everyone else was calculating the cost, humans were already moving toward the scream. And in a galaxy governed by mathematics, that made them the most dangerous variable of all. The distress signal had been answered. The arrival had been noted. The galaxy, whether it admitted it or not, had learned something new. Sometimes the worst math produces the best results. And sometimes the species that refuses to calculate is exactly what the galaxy needs.